All right, now that we got the front end into the shop, let's take a moment to talk about it and how we built it and what it's made from. The tubes, these tubes here are electrical conduit. I believe it's 1 3/4 inch conduit, and the parts that slip over here, what we ended up doing is we just sliced them down the bottom and hammered them over over these pipes here. And also drilled through both layers and added thread inserts down at the end so it will bolt up to the tubes that are sticking out of the body of the bike, and those tubes are 2 inch. So you got a little bit, they fit a little bit sloppy, but once you slide it in and bolt it all down, it's nice and secure. Moving on from the tubes, these pieces here are left and right deck lid hinges from a Volkswagen Jetta. I don't remember the year, but we took them and those are riveted together, and we ground all the rivets off and just took the arms and created these arms, bolted them back together in to kind of act as like this hydraulic steering. These struts are deck lid struts off of a BMW. Once again, I don't remember the model or the year, but they do say BMW right here on them. So, moving forward, the fins are made out of Sentra, and then of course we're getting to the wood pieces up here. Now this main piece down here on the bottom, I don't know how well you can see it, but it bolts the two front ends together, and then there's a rod that supports these fairings that's welded on here. Once this lower wood piece is taken apart, the front end's not going to have much supporting it except for this little rod that's welded, and so I'm going to have to be really careful with it. Once it's apart, I'm going to put it over in a corner and hope nobody bumps it and knocks it over. Also, moving on to the front, I don't know how easy it'll be to see, but I'll slide this a little bit this way so you can look in through here. These are air conditioning lines off of a Ford Escape. They're the exact same line. When we were building this, I had a front end I was repairing. I'm a body man by trade, so I was repairing a front end of a Ford Escape. And I had a junkyard front end that still had the AC lines in it, and I had brand new AC lines. So I grabbed 2 of the old AC lines. They were exactly the same, and one of them I reverse bent it. So one is bent the proper way and the other is straightened and then bent in reverse. And the reason why I grabbed them is I wanted a hydraulic look. So their lines, they're crimped on the rubber lines. It looks like hydraulics. And right here underneath this right here, how these lines attach is a 10mm bolt to the AC compressor, and right here underneath this little detail piece is a bolt that bolts this together. So it's actually held together by a 10mm bolt. On this side, you can actually see, since the little detail piece is missing, you can actually see the 10mm bolt on this side. So with that, I think it's about time we go ahead and tear the front end down. It's the first time this has been apart in 10 years. This will help give it a little more support just in case. This will help support everything just in case it gets bumped or starts moving around. Because I'm going to have to stand this up to unbolt the backside of it. All right. You can also get a look at those AC lines the way they were. All right, we're going to get this put safely away. There we go. So yeah, next up is making patterns. This is basically 1-inch foam. And actually, all the parts we made were made from 3/4 inch pieces of wood. So These parts are going to be a little bit thicker, but at the same time, we're going to be cleaning these parts up, sanding, grinding, maybe even milling them on the milling machine, or like this piece might even get turned on the lathe once we cast it. So having pieces a little bit, having them larger than the originals is actually totally fine. And when I cut all these pieces, I'm going to cut on the outside of all the lines to give me a little bit of extra room there. And this piece, I don't know about this piece yet, but let's get to tracing these parts out onto the foam so we can start cutting out our patterns. Good looking piece. I don't remember how this piece went together. Doesn't look like screws, so I bet we glued this on. So I am going to grab a hammer and a chisel and try to split these pieces real quick. Hopefully I don't break anything, or if I do, I've got enough pieces to glue it back together. Wow, that's really together. Ah, there we go. That's what I want to hear. Uh-oh, there it broke right there. Yeah, it's all glue. And it actually, it's holding really good too. Yeah, see, left a whole layer of wood behind. We can trace that pattern out. There it is. And the final part, this also says nose on it. Something I want to talk about on this piece. This piece was originally suspended from the sides, and there was no structure up here to attach it to the tubes. What we're going to do is we're going to actually expand this part right here and right here so we can actually bolt it down. Adds more strength to the front end, and it also will make this much more rigid piece than it used to be. So I need a little extra room on each side to put these wings on. All right, there we go. And what we're going to do, I'm going to add to it just like so. There we go. So there's the three pieces we need to cut out, and these two will stack on top of each other. The next thing will be the dart, and the way I think we're going to make the dart is I am going to glue a bunch of foam together and turn the dart out on the wood lathe so we can get a nice round shape, and then we'll come back and using our foam cutter cut some pieces to make the fins. And I don't know, but we may not put this base piece back in. What I'm thinking about doing is threading, having a threaded rod coming out of this so this will spin and tighten into this. We'll see when we get there how we're going to put it together, but that's how we're going to do the front ends, the dart. So we're not going to do the dart just yet because I got to glue some foam together. Through the jigsaw. Now we have our pieces all rough cut out, well, these few pieces that we're going to start with, and quickly ran them on the sander, what little bit we could get to it on the sander. I'm going to take these two different pieces of sandpaper on paint sticks and square up all the edges, sand up to the line. First, I'm using a pretty worn out piece of 80, so it won't be too aggressive on the foam. And I'm going to finish it up with what's on one side is 320 and the other side is 180. And I don't know which one of the two I'm going to finish in. I might just finish in the 180 so it's nice and quick. Since we are going to do a slurry dip, the finish actually kind of is a little bit important. The rougher I leave it, in theory, the rougher the finish will be in the cast parts. So if we take the time to sand these pieces nice and smooth and take care of any of the spots like that right there, that'll be that many less imperfections that will be put in the aluminum part, in theory. I haven't done this before. I have done one lost foam casting before, but we didn't use a slurry then, and oh, here it is right here. Here's the result of that part. We don't know. We might actually still use this part. It's already been tapped to accept bolts, but it does have a lot of imperfections in it. You can see right there and right there, and it's a little bit smaller because I did sand it a lot more to get a lot of the imperfections out. So we might redo these pieces based on how well these pieces turn out. So it's time to get to sanding. All right, now this is sanded. We need to attach some sprues to this for the aluminum to travel down into the mold. So if this was a resin part, I would cast it like this. Make the mold and you'd pour up top and let all the air bubbles and everything escape. But since we're making an aluminum part, so we got to attach a sprue. I think I'm going to try to cast this one like this, pouring in from this angle first. The reason why is we have our vessel to hold, because these are all going to be supported in sand, and I don't think this will fit this direction, so I think we're going to have to do it this way. What we're going to use to make our sprues is this white foam. It's an expansion foam. It's very inexpensive, but the best thing is it's not very dense at all. So when the aluminum goes in, it's going to use up a lot less energy to burn through and vaporize this stuff before it gets this. So this is going to create the least amount of resistance to get to our actual mold making or our actual cast. So I'm just going to cut a section off right here so it's easier to work with. I think here works for me. I think we're just going to cut off a piece just like so. Actually, we'll probably cut like this. So I'll end up doubling it over. I know it should be a little bit longer, but right now we're just learning. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so everything I'm doing is for the first time, and hopefully it all goes well. Let that sit there. Now, the slurry is pretty much going to be a homemade slurry. It's going to be made from drywall compound. I didn't buy the pre-made stuff. I bought the powder. You mix it yourself, but it's a non-set. It's not like a plaster. So once we mix it, it's not going to harden on us. So it'll still be here as long as we put a lid on the bucket and keep it fresh. When you mix drywall putty, you pretty much mix it to a putty consistency. We're going to mix it more to a kind of like a thick melted milkshake consistency. That's what we're shooting for, to coat these pieces of foam. One thing we will have to address when we go to dip, all these pieces will be dipped in this slurry to coat the entire surface. One thing is we need to figure out a way to break the water tension. This foam here will bead water on it, so we'll probably give everything a dusting, pre-wet everything with a little bit of soapy water. We're just going to mix up a spray bottle with dishwashing soap and water mix, and we're just going to dust all of these to break that surface tension so the slurry won't beat up and fall off. While we're waiting for this to dry, and this is going to need to dry a little bit longer also, let's mix up some slurry. So, correction, it is not the powder. I thought it was the powder when I bought it. It is not the powder. It is the pre-mixed, ready to go. So that means we are going to have to scoop that out and dilute it. No big deal. We can still make this work. So I can't, oh well. I was expecting to have powder. Now I don't. So I'm just going to grab a handful of this stuff. I'm going to put about half of this jug in, or this bucket in here. And go ahead and mix it. I'm going to end up mixing it by hand, since I can't seem to find my mixer or anything. Reason why I'm going to only mix half at a time is if I mix it too thin, I can actually come back and add more material to it to thicken it up to get it where it needs to be. So that looks pretty good. Just scrape off the sides. Put the lid back on it, scoot it out of the way, bring this guy in. I got water right here. I'll dump a little bit of water in. Just start mixing this up. A little more water. Not much this time though. Not nearly as much as we did the first time. See how thick that is right there? That's still a little too thick. See how thick of a layer it leaves on my hands? We don't want to layer that thick. One of the benefits of putting the slurry on is it's going to help preserve our surface finish, but it's also going to allow the gases to escape when the aluminum pretty much vaporizes the foam. And that's what we want. If it's too thick, it might trap the gases. Also, depending on how delicate your molds are or your patterns, if it's too heavy and too thick while it's wet, it could possibly break your pattern. That's getting closer, but it's still a little bit more. I think a little bit more and we got it. We're getting close though. I think that's about what we want. We're getting close. I think that's about right. Let's do a quick dip test, see how it works. Now we'll probably have to let this dry overnight. Well, definitely dry overnight, maybe a couple days before we can cast. You just want it to leave a coating on there and just drip dry or drip off the excess. So now we got our slurry ready. Now all we have to do is wait for the glue to set up on all of our pieces and get everything assembled and ready to dip. And once they're dipped, we'll hang them over top of this to let it drip all the excess back into the buckets, and then hang them up, maybe throw them underneath a fan or some sort of setup for drying, and we'll be ready to cast these parts in aluminum. right, we let these dry overnight in front of the fan, and they turned out okay, but I got a couple things. Number one, I forgot to spray them down with a little bit of soapy water, and as a result, we got all these little pop marks on here, the little dimples, and what that is water. Since this is all water-based, it's wanting to break apart, and kind of like water on your windshield. It hits and bloop. So that is one issue, and that was totally avoidable. I forgot to spray it down with soapy water. The other thing is the slurry is still a little bit too thick. And one of the ways you can tell that the slurry is too thick is when it dries, it starts to crack and pull back, kind of like a dry lake bed. So next time we do a dip, we want to get this poured. We want to make these parts, and these parts are actually a 1/4 of an inch thicker than they need to be. So we're going to have a lot of material that we can sand and smooth off, and we're going to be able to fix any imperfections we get just because these parts are way thicker than they need to be. So we're going to go ahead and cast these parts as they are, but next time we're going to add some more water to the slurry, try to get it a little more a little less material buildup, and we can then avoid this cracking when it dries. The rest of the parts, this is the only part that did it, and I think it may have ended up getting a little more material than it needed. This one didn't crack and draw back, which is nice, but it did have the pop marks on it from the water trying to bead off of the foam part. Now that normally will only happen on the finished edge of the foam. The sanded areas, that doesn't happen, but on the smoother areas where it's not been sanded or touched, so just to avoid it, don't forget to spray it down with water. We're going to go outside, set these up in the bucket, encapsulate them in sand, and start melting our aluminum. Now I got the pattern nice and buried. I'm not packing it in very tight. I'm just going to surface right here, bring it back just a little bit. Clean the top of it off. Just like so. I'm going to insert my can, put my can right over top of it. Not quite there yet. The reason why I'm putting the aluminum on top here is to get it preheated so it doesn't go in cold. You don't want to take away any energy, and you want to take away the least amount of energy when you put in a colder part. And also, I've had this happen, dropping cold ingots in. I've cracked my crucible.
Well, it took all of it. Our mold did not hold it, shot through the bottom. I think the aluminum's going everywhere. That was way too much aluminum. It should have filled up, and I should have had enough to do ingots. So yeah, it ran right up against that edge. It flowed out of it, and it's hitting the metal. Try. Quench that down a little bit. Hot. All right, we had a catastrophic failure in the mold. It's stuck right there to the side of it. There it is. Look at that. It kind of did good and it kind of didn't do good. I'll show you where it did good and where it failed. See what I was talking about? When you dump it in there, all the scaling flies off. That looks awesome, but you can see right here, it failed all along here and all along there. So we can still save the part though. It's a still usable part, but I figure out why it failed. Well, our first attempt was, I would say, we have a usable part. So it's a semi-success, not quite what we wanted. I knew I had a lot more aluminum than this was taking, and I should have been able to make a bunch of ingots, but we're actually running out of time today. So we're going to use this to wrap up this episode, and we'll come back in the next episode to show off hopefully some really successful parts and the cleanup of some of these parts. Until then, see you next week.